Find a space with like a cushion to sit on. We're a super full, super packed room, that's great. My name is Frank Huizing, I work at the MMA on Women, Peace and Security, among other things. So I'm not a very neutral moderator. If you think I'm not neutral, just raise your hand. Welcome to the signatory event. Very glad to have you all here. So the aim of today is twofold. First, we're going to extend the NAP 2025 until the end of 2020. And we're also going to prepare for NAP 4. So we're going to hear your experiences, your ideas on how to move forward. One thing I was asked to ask, we're going to take photos. If you don't want to be in the picture, just tell on the floor, and she will make sure you're not included in the online pictures. So let's go to the program, slide. So we're going to open with a keynote by a director, Met Gongrijp. Then we have a panel debate. Unfortunately, Charlotte Isaacson from the EU, she couldn't make it. She fell ill yesterday, so we're going to have a replacement, a very good replacement, on the Kokkebol support day. I'll have a video by a Burns, I hope I pronounced her name correctly. And Josephine will also be on stage. And there will be lots of time for you to ask questions and intervene as well. Coffee break, good practice exchange, pledging and signing ceremony, the formal part. And looking forward to 2020. Any questions on the program? If not, we can start by the keynote by a director for social progress. Met Gongrijp was also the ambassador for women's rights and gender equality.
Thank you, Frank. Is the microphone working? Do you hear me? Yes? Very good. Thank you, Frank. And good morning to you all. I'm slightly disabled. For those of you who wonder what happened to me, I went straight into the tram rails. And that's something that I would not recommend to anyone. And I feel slightly ashamed because I lived in Amsterdam and I've lived a couple of years in The Hague also. And each day I'm taking one of these, that's how I call it, to take one of these tram rails, and it always works perfectly fine until this one time that it didn't. So that's why I'm here a bit handicapped, so to say. But I'm very pleased to be here to see the dear NAP community. Many thanks for your presence today. Today we've gathered here to reaffirm, as a community, our continued commitment to the objectives of the National Action Plan and the implementation of Resolution 1325. I would like to tell this morning 3 things. First, why this continued commitment is important. Second, what should be the ambition to the 4th Dutch NAP 1325. And third, how the Ministry of Foreign Affairs supports the implementation of Resolution 1325. During the last signatory event, I shortly reflected on the wave of conservatism visible across the globe. Minister Hague eloquently highlighted this in her speech on women's rights as the canary in the coal mine. During the open debate at the end of October, the wave of conservatism was again affecting the negotiations on the new Women, Peace and Security Resolution. The Netherlands, while now no longer part of the UN Security Council, remains an outspoken voice on women's rights, civic space, and sexual and reproductive health and rights. We play a role as a broker and in building coalitions and holding the line, for example in the European Union and in the group of Friends of Women, Peace and Security. And during these 16 days of the Orange the World campaign, you see I'm wearing the hand here, I can only stress the importance of the full implementation of the WPS agenda. Especially in conflict environments, women's rights are under pressure. We need to be clear on the right of women and girls to live a life free from violence. These dynamics in the international arena underline the challenges we are going to face in the anniversary year 2020. It is important that we will pushing back the pushback and create a strong bloc against the wave of conservatism. Cooperation between governments and CSO is crucial for this. A good way to respond to the pushback is to set an example ourselves. That is why, next to reaffirming our commitment to Resolution 1325, it's equally important to commit ourselves to concrete actions. And that brings me to my second point on what I think should be the level of ambition for the fourth, now 1325. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Women Equals Men, as coordinators of the NAP, have decided to extend NAP 3 with a year because we are ambitious in our vision for NAP 4. We need more time to mobilize support internally and externally for the new action plan. We embrace the diversity of this community and we need everyone's experience in order to bring the fourth NAP 1325 to a higher level. We are proud of this community, we are proud of you, we are proud of the unique character of the NAP that allows for this cooperation with civil society. I am glad that all signatories will commit themselves today to concrete action, and I'm curious to see the pledges. The announcement of pledges is a good exercise for improving accountability within NAP 1325 as recommended in the midterm review. Improving monitoring and evaluation also allows us to report our progress and share our good practices with the EU, for example, and we hope to continue to do that, although Charlotte is not here today. Next to improving accountability, we would like to strengthen the domestic pillar in the next NAP. And in this regard, it's great that the panel today is comprised of like-minded experts who can share their experience with their respective action plans. Lastly, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs remains committed to the implementation of NAP 1325. In the second half of today's meeting, my colleague Hinke Nauta will pledge the specific commitments of the Ministry. As you all know, the Ministry will soon publish its new subsidy framework. This subsidy framework has always been an important funding mechanism for the NAP community as well as the Ministry. Welcome. The new subsidy framework will continue to recognize the valuable role the NAP community has in the implementation of NAP 1325, and NAP signatories will be engaged in the new programs. The details of the Women, Peace and Security Subsidy Framework will be shared upon publication, which is expected at the beginning of next week. To conclude, we welcome you warmly to the signatory event and hope it fills everyone with inspiration for our fourth NAP 1325. We hope this kickoff will lead to an action plan to be proud of in the upcoming anniversary celebration of Resolution 1325. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Netta. It's great. So we'll now move to a video. This is, of course, to reduce the carbon footprint of the event. It's by Aine Harns, and I probably mispronounced her name now. She works at the Irish Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and is currently the director of the Conflict Resolution Unit. And she's responsible for the Ireland National Action Plan, and she was previously the ambassador to Uganda. So she will discuss the domestic pillar, governance, and accountability of the Irish National Action Plan. So I suggest we watch the video first, and then we continue with the panel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Anya Hearns. I'm the Director of the Conflict Resolution Unit in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade in Dublin, in Ireland. I have been invited to your event this morning, but unfortunately cannot attend. And Annika has asked me if I wouldn't mind answering a few questions about our National Action Plan, which may assist you in your deliberations today. I'm very happy to do that. As part of the work of my unit, I'm responsible for the development and the implementation of Ireland's National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. We currently are on our third National Action Plan, which was launched in June of this year. Our National Action Plan is unique in that it has both a domestic and an international dimension to it, and therefore operates a whole of government approach. In developing our third National Action Plan, we try to ensure that it has strong monitoring, evaluation and accountability mechanisms in place. The first is our monitoring framework. We developed the framework with impact in mind, and the process took 2 to 3 months with consultation and buy-in from government departments, state agencies and relevant units. The second is our oversight group mechanism. This group is made up of 50% again of government departments and units that have a responsibility in the actions and activities of the NAP, but also 50% from civil society, which includes academia and includes representatives from civil society that covers the 4 pillars of the National Action Plan, from both the domestic and the international elements. Thirdly, we have decided in our new National Action Plan that we will have an annual report which we will present to our Parliament in the autumn of each year. This is a new initiative which was not in the previous 2 National Action Plans. Then finally, we look at evaluating and reviewing the National Action Plan. So we have built in a mid-term review. We have also built in a final review at the end of the 5-year period. And what it will be unique about the final review is that it will actually review the 3 National Action Plans which we've had in place since 2011 to see what we can learn in the longer term before we undertake our 4th National Action Plan. Ireland's domestic dimension was developed during our 2nd National Action Plan. It takes into account the fact that conflict, it's a continuum, and we need to consider the needs of women and men coming from conflict-affected countries who are coming to Europe for refuge. We need to tap into their knowledge and their needs to enable them to effectively integrate and participate in life in Ireland. The domestic dimension of our National Action Plan falls under the protection and relief and recovery pillar in the current National Action Plan. And in our monitoring framework, we worked with other departments to develop actions such as the Health Service Executive, the Department of Community and Rural Affairs, and more importantly, the Department of Justice and Equality, who have responsibility for migrants and refugees coming into this country. Participation of these women and men is essential in the development and implementation for the domestic National Action Plans, because the National Action Plan and what is in it will affect them directly. So, when we were developing our 3rd National Action Plan, we held 3 consultation workshops where we prioritised the participation of women from conflict-affected contexts. We included women who are living in direct provision centres and men here in Ireland. And we had to consider, when we were doing that, also the barriers that were being brought up for their participation. So, for example, we provided childcare, which was really important. We ensured that there was translation at the conferences so that they were able to fully participate in those conferences and have their voices heard. We included community police who helped them with the transport from the direct provision centres to the events, and this also helped to build bridges between the community police and the women and men and children who were in the direct provision centres. And we worked also with community leaders to make sure that there was a trauma-sensitive approach to the workshops. This was really key because you're driving up a lot of issues which can affect these people. And we operated under the principle of whatever you do, do no harm. So these were some of the issues that we had in getting them to participate. However, we do feel that it was really worthwhile in having them there and having their voices heard. I think the first thing I'd like to say about that is think about impact. What will be the impact of your National Action Plan? Think ahead, think about who you want to benefit from your National Action Plan, and then look at how you want to go about doing that and how you want to include the people who are to benefit from it. Secondly, I would say, please keep it simple. We found that the simpler you can keep it, the better and the more focused that you can be, particularly when it comes to your monitoring framework and the actions and activities that you want to undertake. Thirdly, I would say, capture and claim it. This has become our motto for the 3rd National Action Plan. As when we undertook the review of the 2nd National Action Plan, we found through the interviews which the consultant undertook with the various government departments and state agencies, that an awful lot of additional work had been undertaken by them, but they were not reporting it under the Women, Peace and Security agenda. So therefore we would say, capture what you're doing, claim what you're doing, and put it into your reporting as well. After that, I would just say, I wish you every success with your deliberations and in the development of the next National Action Plan. We're delighted to be a part of it, and if we can be of any further assistance, please don't hesitate to come back to us. Thank you.
So we suggest we start with some introductions, then I have some questions, and then the floor is open for your questions. So wait for the introductions to be over before you start raising your hand, so there will be ample time for questions. Could anybody choose to start?
Sure. So I'm Josephine, and I work for Gender Action for Peace and Security, or GAPS, which is the UK's civil society network on the Women, Peace and Security agenda. We're made up of 19 members, all of whom have a UK-based office, and they work across humanitarian development assistance, human rights with specific organisations working on women and girls' rights, feminist organisations and legal assistance. And our job is to hold the UK government accountable on its Women, Peace and Security National Action Plan. It's to promote gender equality and women and girls' rights in the development of all UK government peace and security policy. It's to support the development of those policies with expertise from international civil society, particularly from Southern women's rights organisations, and based on the rights, needs and experiences of women and girls in fragile and conflict-affected states. And we have what we call a sort of collaborative and open relationship with the UK government, the approach being that we are their critical friend.
Oh, sorry, yeah. That was your punchline.
Yes, oh yeah.
Punchline, yeah, that was a good punchline. I'm not sure if you prepared some sort of introduction. If you would like to maybe shortly introduce your work and what you do on gender, peace and security, and maybe your lessons learned from your experience also on developing national action plans, and also the impact of national action plans to be developed here in the local context of conflict-affected states.
That's a lot of questions.
That's a lot of questions.
And this all happened this morning. But I'll quickly introduce myself. I think most people who are in the room know me, so that's actually quite easy. My name is Anne Krakkenbos. I work for Coordate as the expert to gender, peace and security, and I am in a very privileged role that I get to work in and on fragility in quite a few countries, including Afghanistan, Congo, Burundi, South Sudan, Central African Republic, but also I'm looking for Sabina in the back. Together with Sabina on the NAP program we're doing, and also together with Oxfam in the program we're doing in Afghanistan. So yeah, that's me. As Coordate, we mostly work in conflict-affected countries, and for us, gender should be always integrated in the work we do. But to be 100% honest, that doesn't always happen, and that's still a challenge. We're really trying to do that as much as possible, but we in the Netherlands still have a lot of issues with the patriarchal structures we work in, let alone the countries we work in. And I think saying that out loud and actually being honest about that even within our own work environments, that is already an issue. I think we should have that discussion more, and I think that's maybe one of the things in the next National Action Plan, we should maybe even address that even more. I mean, as some of you know, I know a little bit about the current National Action Plan. I worked on it for a while when I was still with Women Equals Men, and we put in there at that point that we need to address these harmful norms and values. And we've talked a lot about root causes all these years ago, and we keep talking about it, but really touching the things where it really hurts, and really touching those, and not just staying at the upper level. I think that will be extremely interesting if we can challenge ourselves to that in the coming years. And not just that, we've all been, a lot of us have been in New York, working on 1325, having been in that bubble, and it's an important bubble, but it is also, and it's a great bubble, and I love this bubble, and I love seeing everyone again and again every year, but we need to branch out more. And if we really want to have impact with the Women, Peace, Security agenda, we need to work more closely together with groups such as working on SDG 16, for example. And there's not enough overlap yet between these different groups. How do we really get to the hard security issues, and how to avoid, at the same time, that it's not going to be completely militarized agenda, because that's the last thing we want, but also that it's not going to be just a development agenda. And I think that's going to be a very interesting challenge for the coming year. What were the other questions you had? Yeah.
But this is the idea of like getting out of the bubble seems very, very useful and interesting. How can a national action plan, the Dutch national action plan or an EU action plan, how can that help you in the process, get out of the bubble?
It's a very difficult one, because I think because we are in a bubble. But what I see in some of the countries I go to is the fact that they have a national action plan, and if we have a national action plan, it opens a lot more doors. And we can wave with an instrument saying, hey, you developed this, hey, you signed this, you need to commit to this. However, we also see sometimes in countries we go to, they have a beautiful national action plan, beautifully written, and then it ends up in a drawer because either it is with the wrong ministry, or, you know, I mean, even with my colleagues, I sometimes have to have the discussions with them that lobbying the Ministry of Women or Family is probably not going to change that much when it comes to 1325. We need to go to the ministries such as Interior or Defense or work with the police, all these kind of things. If you don't focus on those, there's nothing going to change. But the NAP helps, but needs to be concrete, which was already shared in the video. Sometimes it needs to be very simple. I mean, DRC has a beautiful national action plan. Nobody will read it. It's way too long. It terrifies me, the amount of text you see. Getting it concrete, making sure you can actually use it, and of course, we keep saying it, actually committing sufficient money to it. If you actually manage to commit money to it, so you can do the long-term big programs. Because the small seed things are important, but they're not going to change them for the long term.
How do you get out of the bubble in London? Is there a bubble? We're in the security bubble in London, and how do you get out of it in the development of your NAP?
I would say there definitely is a women, peace and security bubble. I mean, one of the ways that we tried to get out of it is by having this kind of more, our members all bring different types of expertise. Some of our members are multi-mandates, some of our members work very specifically on child rights. And it's making sure that we're bringing in each of those areas of expertise and linking it constantly to the wider frameworks that exist, the Youth, Peace and Security Agenda, the SDGs, particularly 5 and 16, the Arms Trade Treaty even, the CEDAW and the national-led processes that are run for civil society accountability on CEDAW, which are in the UK very poorly joined up to the international accountability processes on women, peace and security. But to kind of draw on, I mean, I'm using this to plug our report, but we recently launched this report, the 10 steps, turning women, peace and security commitments to implementation. And this report is based on consultations in 11 countries with 245 organizations. And one of the main recommendations that came out of that, which is step 5 in here, is on national action plans, that they should be funded, that they should be resourced, not just for their implementation, but for their development, that they should be based on meaningful consultation, and that they should be transparent and accountable documents, so their monitoring and evaluation should be built in from the very beginning. We know implementation is slow on women, peace and security globally, and as you said, this is exactly because we live in a patriarchal world. We have a lack of funding allocated globally and nationally to gender equality, and there are gendered social norms that systematically exclude women and girls from decision-making processes. So NAPs are essential documents for making sure that the commitments that are made are implemented. There are real concerns around NAPs being developed and then ending up, as you said, just as a piece of paper with no resources, no budget for their implementation. And we have, in this report, we have country evidence, really strong evidence from Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, DRC, South Sudan, about how these NAPs have turned into really strong, holistic commitments with no implementation whatsoever to follow on from that. I think the other thing just on NAPs is that they take the higher level strategic approach. So they're not documents that are bogged down by activities and with a list of the exact steps that you're going to take to achieve the impact that you want to see. So making sure that it's leading with the impact, with the change that you want to see. working across the 4 pillars of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and that it's implementable. So anyone can pick up a national action plan and understand what they're supposed to do with that document. And here I'm thinking particularly of those civil servants working in country missions, who Women, Peace and Security is just a small fraction of their responsibility in that post. And so if they don't have a document that they can work with easily, they will really struggle.
Thanks. One of the things we discuss a lot in the ministry now is monitoring, evaluation, and learning. We had an internal evaluation report that was quite critical in how we do that. How do you do that from an outside role as an NGO in the UK? How do you keep the government accountable, maybe as well as others accountable?
Yeah, a few different mechanisms. I mean, firstly, one of our recommendations a few years ago was that the UK government departments responsible for implementing Women, Peace and Security have their own joint internal government working group. So in the UK, that's the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, the Ministry of Defence, and the Department for International Development. And so that representatives from each of those departments who have Women, Peace and Security written explicitly in their job description, if not in their job title, sit together once every 2 weeks to discuss their timeline for implementing their activities, their priorities, and that group meets quarterly with GAPS. So we meet, as I said, once every 3 months, and in 2017, in the development process of the NAP, the current NAP, we met once a month with them, really to make sure that we had as much oversight as possible on that drafting process. And then, as Anya was saying, in Ireland that they now report to Parliament, and this has been quite an established accountability mechanism in the UK. So every year the UK government presents its written report on implementing Women, Peace and Security to Parliament on a panel with the GAPS director, and GAPS writes its own shadow report collaboratively across the network. And it means, we ask that ministers are represented for each of those departments on that panel. So there's really high-level buy-in at that event, and they are also hearing civil society's perspective on the UK government's implementation at the same time. And the event is open to the public, to civil society organisations, academics, and parliamentarians, importantly, to make sure that those ministers can answer questions, on the spot on Women, Peace and Security.
Thanks. Having heard these experiences from Dublin and London, what do you think we can learn here in the Netherlands?
I think we can still learn a lot from many countries, but I think especially what Ireland now has with the parliamentary oversight, I think that will be extremely interesting to see how that's going to work out, because their NAP is quite new, right? I mean, I don't know. Yeah.
The UK one?
Yeah, the Irish one.
I think
June. June. So it's very new. So I think a lot of people internationally are looking at Ireland, like how's this going to go, what is going to come out, and how are parliamentarians going to respond to this? Because I think that's also the experience we have here in the Netherlands, that often parliamentarians don't understand Women, Peace, Security already. So how can you work with that as a lobbyist, and how can you ensure you're not only holding one ministry accountable, but multiple? How do you ensure that the reporting that is going to be done is not just going to be on the programs civil society are doing, but if you actually look deeper into, okay, how as a ministry, how as a government are we really doing this? And that means indeed high-level buy-in. And sometimes I think we struggle a little bit with that in this Women, Peace, Security community, and how can we really get the high-level buy-in and not just saying the words, but the classic one-line, like we need to walk the talk, but how do we get to not just the people here in the room, but really at the highest level? Because I was looking at the wall, and there's also one on women involvement in negotiations, all these kind of things. If we don't put this on the agenda as number one, also at the high-level diplomatic areas we work in, it's not going to happen. And too often I've heard, both in UN situations, but also in missions, in member states, yeah, it's important, and of course we have to talk to the women, but. And I am tired of hearing that but. So it comes back in all these different levels, and that also has to do with the monitoring and evaluation. Yes, it's important, yes, we need to do it, but it is very hard. Well, it might be hard, but someone has to be the first to do it, and the Netherlands has been leading in a lot of things when it comes to the National Action Plan, so I'm very curious how we're going to do that in the coming year when we're going to develop this together.
How should we do it when it comes to monitoring, evaluation, and learning? What are the things we should do better?
Well, I think that's also a discussion we need to have as a group, because we are the only national action plan that's actually a partnership between civil society and the government. So we can't follow the example of Ireland because we're very unique. We need to develop this ourselves, we need to think of this ourselves. And I can't give you a straight answer, just making sure what you were already saying, Josephine, is just having a very clear action plan, very clear, okay, this is what we're going to do, and per group who is involved. And I think we already tried that in the current National Action Plan, to make that list, who is responsible for what, who is doing what. And at that point we started to develop together with everyone a monitoring and evaluation instrument, and for various reasons that, you know, that process slowed down. And it's a while ago, so I don't know reasons anymore. Really sticking to it before we even have the plan. How are we going to do this? And if it's not in there, you know, not accepting a national action plan without a proper monitoring, evaluation, and also learning component in that sense. Yeah. So I think we need to have a very good conversation about that.
Can I come in with just a couple of? I mean, this is advice based on our learning from working on the UK NAP and things that we are not seeing in the UK NAP. Still, and in its accountability mechanism, but one is a standardised reporting framework for the government, or for, you know, those who are accountable to the NAP. Every year, the UK government produces its report in a new format, in a new approach, which is great. I mean, they're obviously trying out different ideas and different ways to move from a narrative report to a more quantitative report to then a country by country report. But this makes it really hard for us to have consistent accountability and kind of shadow reporting formats. You know, if every year the reporting is different, how can we track the progress or the change? And secondly, indicators. I think making sure that the indicators for monitoring and evaluation are being developed as the NAP is being drafted, rather than at the very end being this kind of afterthought of, oh my gosh, we have to have things to measure against. What indicators are we going to use? And we've also seen a very erratic approach to use of indicators, I would say, in UK government monitoring